Hi, this is Jim Kelly, and I'd like to welcome you to Division 8's monthly clinic. This month we'll be talking about JMRI and solving the mystery. Today we'll be exploring JMRI by looking at an overview of what it does, how to install it, and the basics of how to use DecoderPro. Whoops, wrong Java. Got closer, but still the wrong Java. There it is, Java for the really impatient. This is a freebie. It won't be on the test. Oh, caught you by surprise. Yeah, there'll be a test. Okay, the language actually started out being called Oak because of an oak tree that stood outside of Gosling's office. Later it was called Green, and eventually it was renamed Java after the coffee. So what is Java? Well, Java is actually what's referred to as Java Runtime Environment. Back in the late 80s, computers were still pretty young. There was a lot of problems. If you wrote a program, you had to write it for a specific machine. And then if you wanted to use it on another type machine, you had to rewrite it again so that computer could understand the programming language. Sometimes this was called porting, but it involved a lot of tasks, a lot of overhead. So Gosling said, well, what if we could just write a program once and run it anywhere? That was his goal. So Java was born. Okay, and Java runtime environment is simply a series of layers of software that sits on top of the hardware. So you might call it an operating system or a pseudo operating system. Kind of smooths over all the different things that an operating system does. So let's go on, see if we can look at this in a more visual way, make it more understandable. So we start off first with the hardware layer, right? Different machines use different hardware. Basically, they use a different computer chip. So a Windows chip is different than an Apple's chip. Therefore, they don't understand each other's instructions. So to make sure we can understand the instructions, each machine has to have its own operating systems. So Windows was born, Apple's was born, Linux and other type operating systems also followed suit. So once we had these operating systems, you could run things on your machine, but what ran on a Windows wouldn't run on an Apple. So Gosling came along with the idea of the Java runtime environment, which created what's called a virtual machine. This is a quasi-operating system that sits on top of your machine's operating system, and it masks over everything that your operating system does. And by doing that, you could write programs in the Java programming language, and the programmer didn't have to worry about what machine it ran on. The Java runtime environment took care of that for the programmer. This was a great advancement for software development. So what does this mean for you? Not much. It just means you needed to know enough to have an understanding of what was happening so that you could appreciate and have confidence in what you were going to do with JMRI, since it is a Java-based program. How do I get it? How do I install it? How do I know I got the right version? Well, you can go to java.com/download and get it. But if you'll wait just a little while, we'll discuss this in more detail later as we get into how to install the software. Finally, we got the J behind us. Let's talk a little bit more about the MRI, the Model Railroad Interface. That's our hobby. That's what we're truly interested in. So if you go to jmri.org, you'll be greeted by this home page. Now this home page is huge. I mean really huge. This thing is like a web in and of itself. It has thousands of pages. The problem with that is you can get so involved with all the hyperlinks and everything that you lose track of what you really set out to do. So my recommendation is that you pick a subject. Then you go to that page and you read all the way down the page, not for perfect understanding, but for the introduction of what the subject is. Question yourself, do I know what this word means? Do I know what that word means? If you don't, just make a mental picture of it. Read down the page again. Then you can begin to jump to the hyperlinks to begin to get a better understanding of the in-depth meaning of what the page is telling you. Remember, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Okay? So don't be jumping around too much. Try to stay focused. Try just to keep it simple. Okay? And this is technical reading. So I don't advise you reading it in bed at night. It's definitely going to put you to sleep. On the home page, in the top left-hand corner, you see the little choo-choo train. That little icon is the method to get back to home. Anywhere you're at on any page, when you see that icon, you're clicking on it will return you to this home page. Now, kind of a de facto standard now for web pages is that you put your menu across the top of the screen. Somewhere close to the top at least. Maybe you put your banner above it or something. But basically you got your menu at the top of the screen. And then again by de facto default, usually along the side, left-hand side, you'll have a sidebar. Okay, and the sidebar maybe like this one gives you more detail about the menu that you see across the top of the screen. For our discussion today, we're going to focus on the sidebar, and we're going to go item by item down the sidebar. It's just an introduction to you of what JMRI can do for you. So let's get started. DecoderPro, a better tool for programming decoders, simplifying the job by configuring DCC decoders from your computer. This is today's subject. Okay, so by clicking this on the left-hand sidebar, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll get what's shown here. You'll get an introductory page, right? You get an idea of the user's guide, what you need to use DecoderPro, and then down towards the bottom, you get hyperlinks that will jump you up and down to the page. So if you've read it a couple of times, you don't have to scroll the whole page. You can use the hyperlinks to jump directly to a subject within that page. But let's stop here because this is today's subject and we'll pick up more of it later. Next we have PanelPro. Right? It's designed to operate CRT-based CT control panels that reflect real-time state of your railroad. But look what we got. We got that infamous 404 error screen, page not found. Well, this is a volunteer site. It means it's all done freebie. It doesn't cost you anything. All volunteers are maintaining this. Right now this link is broken. So I did a workaround. I simply went back up to the main screen. I went to the menu at the top, pressed on applications. My sidebar updated and I looked there was PanelPro, and in the definitions column there again was a second link to PanelPro. I clicked it, I should say, and there we are. We're back on path again. So PanelPro does what? It provides you with 4 different ways to create panels for your train layout. You have the panel editor, you have the control panel editor, the layout editor, and the switchboard editor. Now what each one of these does is a lesson unto itself. Okay, so we're going to leave it alone. Just give you an example here. These are the types of screens that you can see. On the left hand side, the green screen, that's panel editor. All these little symbols here, you don't develop from scratch. They're copy and paste, they're drag and drop. That's how good that editor is for you. On the right hand side, it's even labeled. It says layout editor. So you can lay out your track, your switches, your signals, everything to do with the actual layout. and link it to real-world I/O. Okay, but this, like I said, is a lesson unto itself. We'll just leave it there. Just know that it can develop beautiful panels for your layout. Dispatch editor. Okay, a system for grouping your roster and your throttles. Okay, the dispatcher organizes information relating to dispatching trains. It is not designed to completely replace a human dispatcher, nor is it an attempt to make dispatcher look or feel anything like a prototype. It's there to help you understand the dispatching job. This is the kind of screen that you might see developed by DecoderPro. You can see there's quite a bit of detail there. Down on the right hand side you see the red track. That means the track is occupied. Currently there's 2 trains there. The light blue track indicates that a route has been set for this train. And you can see this train name has been labeled along the way of the route. But again, this is all a lesson unto itself. We'll leave it there. Operations Pro. Build trains from your roster and print a manifest that tells your train crew what work they need to perform. Okay, Operations Pro allows you to develop a roster. A roster, you might say, is another word for database. Okay, and in that roster you record all your cars. There's a lot of information about the different type of cars you might have. By cars we mean rolling stock. Okay, and an entry for all your locomotives and your locations. Now a location can be a spur or yard, a staging or classifying track. Okay, and routes, so that you can tell your train where to go and how to get there. Now to get to that Operations Pro, you really need to, you leave PanelPro and you leave DecoderPro and you go into PanelPro and you drop down the Tools menu. And at the bottom you see it says Operations. And then it has a list of things we were just talking about. Your settings and your locations, your cars and your locomotives and your routes. And a thing called trains, where you've literally made up a train with different cars, different locomotives. But again, a lesson unto itself. We'll leave it for another day. SoundPro. Now this has nothing to do with sound decoders. This is for standalone speaker systems that you attach to your computer, that you put different soundtracks in. You know, maybe you attach one for your Union Station that announces a train departure in 5 minutes, something of that nature. And SoundPro works by creating buffers, source files, and listeners. Now, a source file is what you stored on your hard drive, but a hard drive is usually too slow to keep up with a fast computer and play real-time sound. So you take that stored source file, you load it into a buffer. Now it's in RAM memory, which is fast enough to keep up with a modern computer. Then you attach it to a listener, and all a listener does is watch for an event to happen. So maybe you attach it to the fast clock so that it listens, and in 5 minutes before the train departure time it triggers an event, and then that event plays your departing recording, announcing to everybody that the train is about to depart. But again, a lesson unto itself. We'll leave it for another day. Cool uses, the next thing on the sidebar. This is just a gallery listing of what other users have done using JMRI. So you can click on these links, go see what other people have done, see the fantastic things that other modelers have accomplished. Get ideas on how you can use JMRI, how it can improve your layout, how it can add to the fun of modeling. JMRI Tools. JMRI has all kinds of hardware tools that you can use. If you go down the list here, you can see you can control your turnouts. You can control things that are called lights, which are basically on and off outputs. So you can control a relay or something of that nature. Sensors, perhaps you have a track sensor, a block detector, that's a sensor. Okay, throttles, we won't read the whole list, but you get the idea. These are all different things that you can have JMRI monitor or control. So let's take a look at a particular one here, sensors. So if I select sensors on the right hand side, I get the overview page. Okay, what is a sensor? All right, how do I control a sensor? Sensor properties and sensor debounce. Okay, dirty track. We've all seen what happens to a decoder or engine running on dirty track. Things get messed up. Things get lost and dropped. Well, if you're doing a block detector and your train runs across dirty track and it loses power for just a second, that input signal to the computer gets dropped. That can be a problem. So you put a debounce circuit on it. Just an idea how you could use it. But DecoderPro uses none of these tools, so we'll save this for another lesson as well. Layout automation. You can do a lot of things manually with JMRI, or you can elect to automate things using JMRI. These are all different listings of things that you can do with layout automation. You can use signaling, you can do entry and exits, which it's a little too much to go into right now. Warrants, dispatcher, routes, fast clocks, and even scripting, which is a form of programming. Okay. Again, over on the right hand side, you get a brief 1 or 2 sentence introduction to what these terms mean. Pick one that you're interested in and go to it. For our example, we'll pick signaling. The right hand screen updates. Okay. And you get across the top, you get the hyperlinks where you could drop down into the page to particular subjects. So once you've read the document and you're a little bit familiar with it, you can jump down the document without having to scroll the whole page. So here you say we begin with the basics, signaling vocabulary. Again, DecoderPro does not use any of these automation tools, so we'll leave them for another lesson as well. Hardware and computer support. JMRI supports a lot of hardware. I don't know of a manufacturer, model train manufacturer, that's not supported. So if you look on the right hand side, each manufacturer is listed. For today, we're going to be using Digitrax as our example. If you were to scroll this page down a little bit, you would find Digitrax. You would click on it, and it would give you a list of all the hardware that Digitrax manufactures that JMRI supports. What computers are supported? Click on the window of the computer of your choice. Today we'll be using Windows. Right-hand screen updates to begin introducing you to how to use Windows and JMRI. That brings us to part 2 of our lesson. So let's get started. Installing Java and JMRI. The first thing we have to do is install the hardware. Can't do anything unless we have the hardware. Once the hardware is installed, then we get to tinker with the software. Installing JMRI is a 2-part installation. First, you have to install the hardware, the computer interface. Today's example, we'll be using a PR3 made by Digitrax. Then we'll install the JMRI software. First of all, get the right manual. Digitrax puts out a lot of different versions of the PR3 software. The hardware is basically the same, but the software changes because the platform changes. The hardware in the computer changes. So if you got XP, make sure you download the manual for the XP. If you're on Windows 7, get the Windows 7 software. Windows 8, Windows 10 do the same thing. And of course, there's Macs. OS 10 sitting there too if you happen to be in the Apple world. Please do read the manual. It's not a big read. It's not really that technical, and it helps. In the manual, you're going to see this. First, it's going to tell you installation consists of 3 parts: the hardware install, the software install, and the software setup. To be honest, this is so simple that the software install and the software setup kind of blends together, and you're not really sure you made the change. Okay, this diagram here, this is a nerd's dream come true. Ain't she beautiful? That's such a beautiful picture. I think I'm going to clip that out, cut that up, make that fit my wallet. Boy, that's a beautiful just a nerd's dream come true. But for the rest of us, you might enjoy this picture a little bit more. This little 3D real world picture simplifies the whole process. Okay, you got the PR3, the little white box there. You got your power supply, the little wall wart on the side. Okay, plug it into the Digitrax PR3. There's only one plug it fits, right? Let's make it as foolproof as possible. Plug the power into the socket that it fits in. Then we plug in the USB cable. And again, it only fits in one spot. Plug it in, the other end goes in the computer, but don't plug it in yet. Okay? Then you got to take 2 wires out and solder them to a piece of rail that you're going to use as your programming platform. Now this has to be isolated from your mainline track. You can't use the same track. Now, yes, you can use a siding, and you can do a lot of little fancy things to break it off, or you can do it as simple as this little picture says. Just get a piece of flex track, set it down on the table, solder 2 wires to it, and screw it into the 2 terminals. You're ready to program. That's all the hardware you need. Once the hardware is set up, then you're going to install the driver. Okay? So you've got the manual, you downloaded it, got the right one. Okay? Windows 10 is what I'm using today as my illustration. Windows 10, the Digitrax manual tells you, hey, Windows 10 got smart. It knows what a PR3 is. So just plug it in, and Windows 10 should find a driver, should install. Everything should be great. No problem. Okay? And it advises you, before you go too much further, you want to go to Device Manager, and you want to look up your COM ports, and you want to find out what COM port that PR3 has been attached to. You need to remember this. It will be on the test. Okay? If you're running an older version of Windows, then the bottom half of the screen you're going to see a statement that says Windows want to install your driver, or search and try to find the best match. Don't let it. Say no, thank you. I'll tell you what to do. Take control. Go out on your CD. Go to the right directory. Point it to the driver file that needs to be installed. Okay? Those details are in the manual, so we're not going to beat it to death here. Okay? That manual is important to you. Now you can plug in your hardware. Just another reminder. We brushed a little bit on this earlier when we went through the introduction. If you go back on the JMRI screen and go up to hardware, it will show you on the Digitrax that it has these documents available that right there on JMRI. You can review those documents as well. Installing the software. Now that we've got the PR3 installed, now it's time to do something with it. So we got to do 2 things. First, we got to install the Java runtime environment. Then we have to install JMRI. So let's get started. Okay, keep it simple if you want. Go to Google, say get Java 1.8. Look in the search results and you'll find download free Java software. Click on that link. Okay? Or if you remember earlier in the screens, you can go back to it at your convenience. It said java.com/downloads. That's another place you can get it. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go to java.com downloads. Okay, once there, you're going to get a screen like this. Now yours will look a little bit different if you've never installed Java before. My machines, all of my machines, have already got Java installed. So the screen's a little bit different, but not so different that you won't recognize it. It's going to have this same format, but it says there on the screen, it says Java download. It's going to recommend what version of Java it thinks you ought to have for your machine. Okay, so just pay attention to that. In my case, having already installed Java, it's just going to tell me, hey, there's an update to version 8. We recommend that you download this and install it. If you've never installed it, it's going to say, we recommend that you download and install version 8. Okay. In the big yellow box there is a warning. Okay. Java is going to change their licensing agreement in the near future. It won't be free anymore, but that's not completely true. It won't be free for commercial use. For private use, they're still got a couple of years of free licensing, and they're still working all those details out. You don't have to worry about it. All the nerds at JMRI, they're taking care of that for you. They're aware of it, and they're watching it, and they'll let you know what you need to do. Okay, so the important thing here is the little red button down at the bottom there. It says Java download. If you click on the Java download, it's going to change and say agree and start to download. So what you're saying is I agree to the standard terms and conditions. You know, the ones that no one ever reads. Okay, so click it again and start the download. Now, I'm on Windows 10. I'm running Chrome browser. You may be on Windows 7 and you may be running IE 6 or 8 or whatever the latest Internet Explorer version is. What is it, 10 I think? Okay, but you know your machine, you know your browser, you know how it downloads a file, you know where it puts it. So we're not going to go into all those details. Okay, for me, my browser is going to give me this little pop-up at the bottom of the browser showing me that it's downloading a file. Okay, once it's downloaded, I'm going to click the little arrow and I'm going to say open it, which is another term for run. Once I do that, I'm going to be greeted with this little welcome to Java. Okay, there's only one option that you can change for installing Java. The bottom left hand corner, it says change the destination folder. Now, if you're a Java developer and you're developing for older versions of Java and newer versions of Java where you need to keep the two separated, that's something you might use. But as a standard user, leave it alone. Don't even touch it. All you're going to do is go and click the install button. Once you click the install button, you're going to get their little advertisement screen. Java is installed on 3 billion devices. It's true. It's everywhere, even on your telephone. And of course, you see the little green bar there. The little green bar is going to update, showing you the progress. And when it gets close to the end, you'll finally get this. You have successfully installed Java. Okay, that's all there is. No more for you to do. Okay, Java now disappears into the background. You probably never even know it's there. The only thing you might see is once, maybe twice a year, when Java will pop up and tell you, hey, there's an update. Do you want the latest and the greatest version? Tell it yes, you want the latest and greatest. Why? Because JMRI is updating and using the new features. So you want to keep current with Java as well. That brings us now to installing the JMRI software itself. So let's go back to the JMRI website screen. Back to the main page. Up on the menu, we can select download. Once we select download, the sidebar updates and says download and install JMRI. And it says install guides. For us, we're going to pick the Windows install. And here we get the instructions, the how-tos of how to install it on Windows. It's a long screen, long window, so just cursor it down through it. Read it once before you do anything. But as you cursor down through it, you're going to get greeted by this little section, right? Installation procedure, step 1. Okay, what do you need? What are the requirements? It's going to tell you that you need Java 1.8 if you're running this version of JMRI, version 4. Actually, anything past 4.2 requires Java 1.8. And since you're doing a new install, that's what you're going to want. We just did that. Java's installed. We meet the requirements. Okay. Next thing it's going to tell you is, hey, what version of Windows are you running? Are you on Windows 7? Are you on Vista? All the way back to, believe it or not, JMRI ran on Windows 98. Okay, and it's going to tell you what you need for each one of those versions of Windows. We're going to assume you're running on Windows 10. Okay, so it's going to tell you you can run the current JMRI test or the production released. What's the difference? Production release is the steady state version. It's solid. Very few mistakes are in it. Okay? It's the end user's dream to come true. It's what you want to just use it. The current JMRI test is where they're adding new features, where they're upgrading to meet new hardware changes, things of that nature. They use the JMRI community as a test bed. So they put those test versions out there, and the nerds and those people that got to have the first of everything, they download that and put it in, and they run and tinker with it, and they try to break it. And then they give feedback to the JMRI development team. So if you're that kind of person, have fun. If you're there to run trains and you just want to use a good steady program, get the production release. Okay, here we go. Step 2, go to the screen and get the JMRI, download it. Okay, when you go to that screen, you're going to see the production release block. There'll be one for test versions, and then there's one that says production release, just like this screen says. Look on the screen, find your operating system. Are you running OS 10, Windows, or Linux? Okay, of course we're demonstrating this using Windows, so I'm going to click on the hyperlink to download the Windows version. Again, my browser is going to open up that little bar at the bottom of my screen. It's showing me that it's downloading JMRI. When it's done, I'm going to click the little arrow. I'm going to push the open button, and I'm going to get this welcome screen. I'm sure you guys have all seen this welcome screen. It's pretty standard. Okay, many programs use this installer, so the pictures are commonplace. You're going to get asked some very fundamental basic questions. So we're not going to run through each and every one of these screens. You've seen them. At least watch somebody install a program for you. So we're just going to capture the essence here. You're going to get asked, where do you want to install it? Okay, where are you going to do you want to install it for one user or 2 users, or all users on your computers, or just you, I should say. Okay, so as you go through those steps, I want you to repeat after me. Default, default, default. Always take the defaults. Let it put it where it wants it. When you do upgrades and everything, And JMRI knows exactly where everything's at, and it doesn't have any hiccups, right? It's just like most other software. That's what you do, right? You let it go where it wants to go. You let it do its thing. Upgrades go much smoother. Now, if you go through the JMRI install on the JMRI webpage, which we're using as a reference, it has all these screens that I told you we've skipped over. When you get to step 7 here, it says it's checking for Java. This is not true. This was true in the old, what version is that? JMRI 2.5.2. Okay, that was the last time this document was updated. We're at Java 2.14, I think it is right now. So it's a little out of date. It doesn't ask or check if Java's installed. Okay, but we just did that, so we know we're good. Just skip over that part. The last screen you're going to see, of course, is the little green bar. Okay, your progress is coming along just fine. When it's done, it's going to tell you finished. Just click finished and exit the installer. Now, before we move on to how to use the DecoderPro, I'd like to give a little word of acknowledgement to the JMRI support team and their users group. Okay, if you go to groups.io, you can look up and search for JMRI users. It's here at the bottom of the screen. I know it's real light, guys, but if you squint a little bit, you can see it. No matter what I tried, I could not get it any darker. Okay, but it's there. Go there. There's a lot of help. You can ask questions, okay, and they're very polite. You know, I've been on this site for 2 years. Sometimes when you use a group like this, you'll see somebody out there that gets frustrated and they'll put RTFM, right? Because they're way past this question. They did this 5 years ago and they've answered the question 30 times, okay? RTFM means read the fine manual. You got what it means, okay? So, yeah, do read the manual. Try to find it on your own, but they'll answer your questions, and I've never seen that term used. It's very, very friendly group. Now, what I do is I've joined this group, and I have it sent to my email box. So every time a question gets asked and there's a reply to it, I get it in my email box. So I filtered my inbox and I set it all up, you know, so that my train stuff is set out in a group of its own. So my inbox isn't flooded with all this until I'm ready to view it. So now that we've installed the PR3, the hardware, and we've done the software installed, we're ready to use DecoderPro. There's 2 ways we can do that. We can either click the icons on the desktop, pretty little icons there, or we can call up the menu and we can scroll down and pick it off the menu. So let's get started. We click on the icon and the first thing you'll get greeted with is this little box in the center of the screen, right? The little JMRI icon sitting there all by itself. Give it a couple of seconds. It's busy doing a little stuff, okay? But it won't take long, and soon you'll be greeted by the install wizard. Again, we're assuming this is the first time you've ever done it, so this is what you're going to see, okay? So you get welcomed, and you click the next button. When you click the next button, it asks some very simple questions. What language do you want to talk? Right? Most of it is going to be English, but this is a program used around the world, and it's available in other languages if you prefer that. So select your language. In this case, we'll go with English. And then they give you this little box that you can type in. It says default owner. Now, JMRI is used by individuals on their home layouts, but it's also used by clubs at club layouts. So there's a different way of approaching it. At home, you're the owner, so you don't want to repetitively type in who's the owner. So type your name in here or whatever you want to call it, okay? And then it fills that box in for you. But if you work at a club, leave it blank and just move on. And then at the appropriate time, you fill in the odor. Maybe it's mine, maybe it's Bob's, maybe it's Henry's, maybe it's Sheila's. Okay? Doesn't matter. You can leave it blank or you can fill your own name in so that box is taken care of for you in later screens. We'll click Next. And then it wants to know what manufacturer of hardware are you using. Remember, DecoderPro supports all kinds of manufacturers. So we'll scroll down the list till we get to Digitrax, because that's what our demonstration is based on. Okay, and we'll click on Digitrax and it fills in the little drop down for us. Then it wants to know what kind of connection we're making. Okay, why? Because Digitrax offers all these different pieces of hardware that it talks to. Pick the one that's appropriate. Okay, in our case, we're going to use the LocalNet PR3. Now, if you use the LocalNet local buffer, go back and read your manual. The one that I told you is handy because you're going to have to push a couple of buttons and tell it you're using it as a standalone, and you're going to have to set an end of network. Oh, I can't even think of the term right now. Terminator. That's what it is. You're going to have to put a terminator on your LocalNet bus. Okay, but we're going to use it as typical operator would do it. We're going to use it as attached to our layout. So we want a LocalNet PR3. Here's the test, people. Okay, see if you paid attention. Remember way back when we installed PR3, and the Windows 10 manual told you to do what? Go to the device manager and remember what? What COM channel you put it on. Oh dear, I forgot. Now what do? You cheat. Okay, simple. It's multiple choice. Try COM1. Okay, click COM1. What's going to happen now is DecoderPro will go out and try to make the connection. Okay, and if you can't find it on COM port 1, you're going to get these red letter pop-ups that says, hey, I can't find it. Okay, cheat again. Select the next COM port. Let it try. Oh, it's happy. It's on COM port 3. Whew. Got past that one. Okay, so it's no big deal. You passed the test. Okay, once you've set it all up, okay, and told it what COM port you're on, then it wants to know what command station you're using. Okay, so pick it from the list. Which Digitrax command station are you using? And you put it in. And you'll notice across the bottom of the screen, scrolling up slowly, each of the last two screens, it says JMRI expects to find an already installed connecting device. Right? I've been talking to you about it. It's going out now to find that hardware, to make sure that it can talk to the hardware. If not, it's going to tell you about it. Okay? So now you've connected the command station. The next two things are for humans. Okay? Nothing to do with the Digitrax hardware. You see the connection prefix there. It's the letter L. By default, DecoderPro uses L to indicate this is a LocalNet connection. Okay? Because you're going to talk to inputs, outputs, and addresses on the LocalNet. So it's going to put an L in front of everything it does with LocalNet. Okay? A connection name. Here I've typed in LocalNet. This is for humans. This has nothing to do with actually it being a LocalNet. I could have put Jim's connection. I could have put Lydia's connection. Anything I want in there. Okay? LocalNet makes sense because later when I'm looking, I'll see LocalNet and I'll know to choose it. Why is that important? Because you can have more than one connection in DecoderPro. and running at the same time. Okay, that's a little more advanced. We'll let it go at that. Just know this is a name for you to be able to recognize your connection. You'll see it again a little bit later in our discussion. Okay, now we've got the software talking to the hardware. We've got everything all set up. So now it's ready to start using the software for the purpose that we want it for. We want to use it, talk to decoders. So here's your roster screen. Now as soon as you generate a brand new program, of course the database is empty. There's nothing in the roster. So the empty screen comes up with a little bit of help in there. Steps 1, 2, and 3. I'm not going to read these to you because we're actually going to step through them here. Okay? So what are we going to do? We're going to open up. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up here and we're going to select New Loco. When you select New Loco, you're going to get this pop-up. Right? And here you're going to go to the list of decoder type install. For this example, I did a Broadway Limited install. Okay? So we're going to use Broadway Limited. You just scroll down the list, you find it, you click on it, and it expands and drops down. Why? Broadway Limited makes two different kinds of decoders. So there's Paragon 2 and there's Paragon 3. So I've opened up Paragon 3, right? And what I'm going to use as our demonstration is a diesel. So as soon as I click on diesel, the pop-up expands open, okay? And at the top of that expanded pop-up is roster ID. This is for us humans, okay? Plug in anything you want to identify this locomotive or this decoder, okay? I used the Mighty 15, okay? That was the first diesel that ever drove the Hiawatha, so I'm fond of that. I used the Mighty 15. That was the first diesel that they had. And since it expects it to be a new install, it's going to select the short address, the factory default of 3. Now this is great if it's a brand new one, okay? But what if you pick this up at a flea market somewhere, okay? A train show. You might not even know what that address is. Well, down here at the bottom, you have the read, the write, and the save functions, okay? Further over here on the left, you also have the read type from the decoder, okay? So, again, you bought this thing secondhand. You don't know what the guy installed. You don't know the manufacturer. You just know it's DCC equipped. So instead of sorting down through the list to find the manufacturer, you can say read it from the decoder. DecoderPro will go out onto the programming track, query the decoder to find out what manufacturer it is, and will come back and give you its best choice. Pick the choice, okay? Defaults then over here to the right hand side of the screen. Fills in the address because he may have changed the address. He may have set it to the locomotive number. Okay. So we've set the address, and then there's a third choice we have here, and that's, do we want this decoder to operate in DC mode, okay, or do we want it to operate in DC only mode? Okay, the drop down box there, select how you want it to perform. Personally, I like to set mine so that they're all just DCC only. Okay. We're going to leave these read and write statements alone for right now, and we're going to take the safe bet. Once we put all this information in, we're going to tell it to save. Once we hit the save button, congratulations, you've just made your first roster entry. Okay, see the little blue bar across the top? Yeah, I got the brown arrow pointing at it, right? Okay, so that's your first roster entry, and it's put in the basics that we've just typed in. Okay, going along with that top screen, down here on the bottom is a little bit easier portion of the screen to read. It's simply going to repeat whatever you've selected on the table list there. Makes it a little easier to read. all this that we're discussing now, just a reminder, it's all in the user's manual on the JMRI website. So let's not forget that. On the right hand bottom corner, there's 3 options. Okay, 2 of them are decoder specific. The third one is for us humans only. Okay, we can talk to the decoder on the programming track, or we can talk to it on the main, POM, right? Programming on the main. Okay, or we can tell it edit only. The edit only function are the things, the convenient things that JMRI does for us, that stores it in the computer, but it has nothing to do with the actual decoder in your locomotive. Okay, so we're going to start out here with editing only what's in the roster files. Okay, and to do that, we simply go down here and we push the labels and the media button. Okay, and as soon as you click that, you'll get greeted with this screen. Okay, your functions can now have nice English words assigned to them. This screen is a tab screen. If you look close at the top, you see it says function labels and roster media. Okay, so it pops up under the function labels. And you can do several things with your functions here now. So you see functions 0 through function 28 listed. Get out your little manufacturer's cheat sheet so that you know what's going on and you know what each function is. And go in here on the labels column, okay, and just enter the English word for what each one of those labels or functions is. Okay, once you've done that, then you go over here to the column that labeled lock. Okay, and what this is going to do on a JMRI throttle, now that can be one that's on the computer screen. Okay, that can be one that's on a web screen somewhere around your layout, or that can be on your telephone. Okay, but if you're using a JMRI throttle, all these nice English words are going to appear instead of F1 through F20. Okay, and the buttons are going to be controlled by this lock setting. Now, most throttles right now, you push it one, it's on. It stays on till you push it again and it turns it off. Okay, another way to look at that is say it's locked or it's unlocked. Okay, so if you push the button and you want it to stay on until you turn it off, you click the little lock feature here. If you don't want that, if you want it to be a momentary switch, like perhaps your horn or your bell, okay, you only want the horn to blow while you're holding the button down. Okay, uncheck the lock. Then it's a momentary switch. The button is active as long as you hold it down. You release it, it turns off automatically. Okay, nice feature. Next, you see these little boxes labeled on and off. Okay, no, it's nothing to do with the buttons other than they're placeholders for icons. So you can custom make little icons for each one of your little function buttons. Like your horn, you can put a little horn out there, and then for on, and then maybe for off you put a horn with the international slash through it showing that it's off. Okay, and you drag and drop these over here, drop them in on these little placeholders, and now on your throttles you get the little pictures, okay, along with the English words. Okay, it's a nice feature. Then we got this little thing called shunt. Okay, now I didn't know what shunt was for a while, and I actually had to go to the JMRI group to find out, because this is one of those things that I couldn't find on the JMRI website. Wasn't really talked about much. Yeah, it's there. It says use it for shunting. Turns out that shunting is a term that most of the world outside the United States use for switching operations. Okay, so you know when you're doing switching, you're doing a little bit of forward movement, a little bit of backward movement, and you're coupling and uncoupling as you're moving cars around in the yard. England, they call that shunting. So what this does is it changes how your throttle behaves. On this screen that's coming up right here, this is a typical throttle that you would see on a computer screen when you open a throttle in JMRI. On the far left hand side, you'll see the throttle control itself. It says forward, reverse, and then it goes from stop to 50% to 100%. Okay, and you'd use your mouse, you drag that up and down to the speed that you want. Okay, now that's fine for, when you're out on the open road and you kind of put it up there and you hold it steady for a long time. But what if you are shunting? What if you're in a yard and you're busy moving back and forth, back and forth? Well, if you set one of these functions for shunting, okay, then it changes your throttle to look like this. And I put the new throttle right next to the standard throttle so you could see the difference. Okay, so when you go put it in shunt mode, okay, in this case I've got F3 clicked for shunting. Okay, so when I click F3, the throttle screen updates, and you can see stop now moves to the center of the screen, and I have forward going up and reverse going down. So now I can just ride my throttle up and down and change the direction and the speed of my engine. It's much more convenient when doing yard work. Now we'll flip over here and we'll look at the roster tab on this screen. Okay, when you go to the roster media, you get to upload pictures of your locomotives and put them into the screens. You do this by simply dragging and dropping the picture that you want to use. The big one is for the big background shots. The little one is where you want to use an icon. Okay, so you just drag them and drop them in there. The bottom, there's this big white box. Okay, many times there'll be nothing in there. Okay, this is an advanced feature. We're not going to talk too much about it. But I did want to point out, it tells you right there, don't change anything in this box unless you know what you're about to change. Okay, leave it alone if you don't know what's going on. Okay, so once we've set our function labels and we've installed our media files, we want to save it to the roster. Once you save it to the roster, you return back to the roster screen. You'll notice now that you see here, I've got the pictures, the media pictures that were installed. Look on the blue bar. Okay, you see the little white box under model? That's because I double clicked right there. Now I can use my keyboard and I can type in the model setting, right? And it will hit enter and it will update. So I can change the data on these locomotives once they're entered in my roster. But there's an easier way to do that. We're going to cover that later. But I just wanted you to see that you can do it that way. You can see that I've actually entered a few items into the roster entry for that. Updated a few things. This has been great stuff. We came here to talk about decoders. Okay? When are we going to talk about them? I thought you'd never ask. So let's do that. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the Mighty 15, our one and only roster entry at this time. Okay, select it. Then you're going to come down here in the right hand corner and you're going to tell it where you want to talk to this decoder. We're going to talk to it on the programming track. Once we've set that little button, we push the program button. When you push that, you get greeted with a new pop-up window. Again, this is a tabbed window. Okay, if you look across the top, what are there, 18 tabs up there? I'm not quite sure, but there's a lot of tabs up there, and the active tab is slightly highlighted. Here we are, we're on the roster entry screen. Remember I told you you could go up to the roster blue line and tap on it and type in? Well, here's actually that blue line in a much more convenient form. So you can go change the name, you can enter the road name, you can enter the road number, the manufacturer, you can add a comment about this, you can even add a comment about the decoder okay, if there's something particular about this decoder. Okay, so we've kind of seen all this information, so we're not going to stay with this screen, this tab, too long. Then we've seen this. Okay, we just did this a minute ago. We put all the English in here. We defined our buttons as locked or not locked. We put our icons in place, and maybe we've selected one for shunt operations. And here again, we dragged and dropped our pretty little pictures in. And here's, you see this little screen's updated down here. Remember I told you it might have data in it? Now it has data in it, right? And it tells me the last time I operated this engine, okay, and how long I operated it. Okay, don't change any of that, leave it alone. Just kind of gives you a little information about what's going on. Now we'll start to see new screens. First new screen we'll see is what's called basic. This is your basic information about the locomotive. Okay, is it a short address? Is it a long address? What is the address? Okay, what is the primary address? What is the extended address? Okay, how many speed steps does it have? Okay, again, do I want it to be DCC only, or do I want to allow it to operate in DC mode? Okay, if you change anything, the color of whatever you changed will change to tannish yellow. Okay, I don't know what you're going to call that. Almost an orange, I guess. Okay, so here you see I changed the address to be 7, and it changed the color. That tells me that a change has been made, but it's not recorded anywhere. It's not been saved to anything. Okay, just lets me know. And I can jump around through all these tabs, and I can come back and I can see that I've made a change. Okay, when you're doing a read or a write operation, okay, if something goes wrong, whatever went wrong will have a red background. Okay, so if you see red, stop, make a correction. If you see orange, yellow, that means you've made a change, but it hasn't been saved to anything yet. Okay, so if you try to bail out by using the Windows X in the right hand corner, you'll get a little warning box, right? It says, hey, you've made changes, but they haven't been written to the decoder yet. Okay, and they'll be lost if you close this window. Okay, so you probably want to cancel that and save that change. Okay, how do you do that? Bottom of the screen. Okay, when you change like the address, you need to get it out to the decoder. So you write changes on sheet. We're going to stop and take a little bit more information about what you're seeing down here on this bottom row now. Okay, so let's get a little more detail about this. Okay, the 3 lines at the bottom there, read changes on sheet, read changes on all sheets, and programming mode, right? Those 3 lines. That's what we're going to stop talk about here. Okay, the top one, if you've made a change in a tab or a window, okay, or a screen or a pane, they kind of use those terms interchangeably. Okay, but if you made it the top row, it will write that change and only the change on that visible screen to the decoder. It's the most common way of doing it. You know, how do you eat that elephant? One bite at a time. How do you change the decoder? Small bites at a time. Okay, don't try to make huge changes. Why? We all know dirty track is the worst thing you can have. And errors, the possibility for errors increases the more you try to read and write to a decoder. So do it in small increments. You'll catch your mistakes or errors much quicker. Okay, so you can also read in only that screen from a decoder, and it will update with what the information that's pulled back from the decoder. Okay, the truth is, when you do a new decoder, probably the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to read that data in. Okay, and I'll give you more on that in just a minute. Okay, all panes. So the second method you can do it, you can go to the first screen, make a change, go to the second tab, make a change, go to the third tab, make a change. Then you can say write all changes on all sheets to the decoder. Okay, the one that I'm telling you is most error prone. Okay, so depends on you, your particular setup may work fine for you. Okay. So the most important button on here is going to be the write changes, right? That's the one that's going to send the new information out to your decoder. Let's talk a little bit about the programming mode. There's actually 4 modes of programming as described here. Okay, address mode. It's the outdated mode. They keep it so that it meets the National Model Railroad Association standard. Okay, the standards aren't keeping up with the hardware. Okay, so JMRI says we're going to honor the standard. It's there. If you got a really old decoder, you may need to use address mode. Okay, register mode is still in older decoders. Okay, it's better than address mode, but it's still kind of old and outdated. Okay, page mode. This is the preferred method of talking to a decoder, and in most cases, it's the default that JMRI will select. Now, JMRI has got a good history of all these decoders, okay? And if it knows the best method, it's going to select it for you. So always try what JMRI offers as your first shot, okay? You don't have to play with this button much. Let JMRI handle it for you. Usually there's not a problem, okay? And then there's direct mode. Now, direct mode is kind of new, okay? The newer decoder chips coming out prefer this mode. It's better. But being new, not all the decoder manufacturers are supporting it yet. Okay, so you can try it, but unless JMRI is offering it, I'd stay with page mode. Okay, now if you're in page mode and it doesn't want to work, then try the direct mode, because you may have a newer chip that will support direct mode. Again, though, leave it there. Just, let DecoderPro pick the programming mode. Okay. The next screen we go to is the motor, right? Back EMF. Oh, we all play with back EMF, right? We like to have these nice glide slows, and we like to have it take off nice and smooth instead of being able to go from 0 to 100 in 2 inches of track, right? We want the realism. Okay, so we come in here and we play with this until we get what we want. Okay, so this is a nice, quick, easy way of doing it. Okay, next screen, basic speed control. There's a couple of interesting things about here. Okay, you have this little button here that says that you want to use this feature. Right? You want to use the basic speed control. You want to use the V stat, the V mid, and the V high. You want to set your own voltage points. Okay? And it gives you this option because there's actually a second choice, and that's the speed table. As you can see, that's the next tab we're going to. So if you put the little black dot here, you're going to use the basic speed control, and you're going to set your own voltage levels. Okay, let's advance to the next screen, which happens to be the speed table. Okay, now if you want to use the speed table instead of the basic screen speed control, then you're going to click on it here and put the little black dot here that says use the speeds table. Then what you get to do is you get these little green bars and these yellow slots. Each one of those is a speed step. Okay, you move that bar up and down, and you create whatever wave pattern you want, and your locomotive speed then will follow that speed table. Okay, and just as an example, I'll show you what a log curve would look like if you select. There's some preset standards down here that you can select, or like I said, make your own. Okay, so if I select a log curve, right, it preloads it and gives you this nice smooth arc. So as you hit your throttle, you step up speed, okay, along this arc. Now, why did this turn orange? You're right, because I made a change, but I haven't saved it. Okay, it's not out in the decoder, it's only in RAM memory. DecoderPro is remembering it, but it hasn't sent it, made a command and sent it to the decoder yet. Okay, so I'm going to do what? I'm going to write it out to the decoder. Okay, the next tab, function tab. Here you have all 28 available functions. Okay, and each one has a drop-down menu associated with it. If you want to remap your functions, this is where you do it. Different manufacturers, even though they have many of the same functions, they map them to different keys. So you get out your cheat sheet. DecoderPro helps, and you can put English language so you can look at the screen and recall it without the cheat sheet, or you can set your own standard definitions for your functions. And you can go into all your decoders and you can remap them so that they're all in the same function key. And then you form, that memory, what do they call it, muscle memory. F5 always does this no matter what engine you're on. Okay, so that's one of the features you can use here. Okay, so you use the drop-down list, okay, to pick what function you want to assign to that function key. Lights depends on these screens. All of them, they change according to the chip that you've got installed. Okay, so while I'm demonstrating this with a Paragon 3, if you're using a Digitrax decoder, it may not have all these screens. Okay, but it depends on the manufacturer and what they allow you to do. But here I have the light screen, so I can go through all the lights on this engine and I can set up how they're going to be used. Okay, analog controls. Okay, here I've got it set to digital only, but if I put it for DC operation, then I can come in here and I can play with all these voltage settings for the different things that this chip will do in the DC mode. Advanced consisting. Okay, here I put the consist address that this decoder is going to work with. Once I've assigned it an address, then I can come in and I can say what functions are going to work with this consist address. You might have an A unit and a B unit, and you push the horn button, okay? And when you push the horn button, both the A unit and the B unit decoder respond, and you get two blaring horns. It may be too much for your layout. You might be in a small room, might be too much volume. So you can say, I want this decoder to obey I want it to respond to the consist address. Or you can tell it, I want it to respond only to the locomotive address. Okay, so if you set the B unit in the consist to the locomotive address, if you're running it under the consist address and you blow the horn, the B horn won't blow. Only the A horn will blow. Okay, so you can play with that and set it all up to your liking. Under the Advanced tab, for this decoder, there's only one thing that's under the Advanced tab. It's for the nerds, packet timeout value. Okay, for me, that tells me if I'm trying to talk to my decoder and I'm getting a lot of errors and things are just not going smooth, I can come in here and maybe up this timeout value a little bit and give it a little bit more time to respond to my commands. Maybe that will help. Most of the time you won't touch those commands. Sound. Here you get to play with your sound. Okay, coupler slack, how many times will it repeat? The interval for your coupler slack sounds, your bell ring intervals, enable and disable these things, right? Breaks, rolling thunder, whatever the chip can do in the way of sound. Next tab, sound levels. Okay, so now you can come into all these different sound features. They don't have to operate at the same volume. You can increase the sound of your horn. You can decrease the sound of your brake squeal or whatever you want to do. Okay, slide them up and down. Okay, make them the way you want them. This is the CV screen. Now, you know, if you've played with decoders at all for any amount of time, you've heard the CV term. Okay, it used to be you had to have a sheet and you had to know CV12 did this and did that, and you had to know what range of a number you could legitimately put in it and everything. You can do that here. If you want to go back to that, if you know specifically what CV you want to change and you know the value you want to put in it, you can come in here and you can plop that sucker right in, and there's a write key where you can just send it right on out to the decoder. What I like to use this screen for, okay, when I do a brand new decoder for the first time, I come to this screen first thing, okay, and I go down here and I do a read all sheets, okay. The reason I'm doing that is because when DecoderPro loads the file for this manufacturer's decoder, it loads in all the default settings. Okay, you may not have default settings in that decoder, and you may like what's out there. You may want to use DecoderPro to make a backup historical record. So if anything goes wrong, you can go back to those settings. Okay, so I come to this screen first thing and I say read all sheets. Go get coffee. Okay, yeah. Relax, because you're going to see down here where the screen says, instead of saying idle, it's going to say reading, 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 reading. Okay, and it's going to tell you it's doing stuff. It's going to take a little while because it's got a lot to read. Okay, once it's done, it'll go back to saying it's an idle. Then what I do is I take my mouse and I cursor up and down that list. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm looking for those red boxes that I told you about. Remember, a red box tells you that there was an error when it tried to read that. Okay, you stop at that red box, highlight it, and you push the read button next to it. And then it will go out and it will read only that CV and it will pull back that information. And normally, blip, it's okay. Okay, and I go down through it and I make sure there are no red boxes, and then I know I've got 100% of everything that was in that decoder. It's now pulled into DecoderPro. Now I can go play with all my other tabs, right? And I know I'm playing with real world data. That's how I use this screen. Okay, just a thought. The next screen, DCC control. Okay, again here, you know, it talks about your uncoupling, your cab lights, your brake settings, brake release controls, and brake timer. Yours may not even have this screen. Okay, depends on what your chip does. Okay, and the last screen we see is settings. Kind of a generic term, isn't it? Settings. Okay, for this decoder, it's mostly about the smoke unit. You know, the fan speed, when will it turn on, when will it turn off, different settings that you can set for it. Okay, and pretty handy little screen. I've used it on my smokers. Okay, so once you've done all these screens, what are you going to do? You're going to make sure there's no orange screens, there's no red screens, right? Once you do that, right, then you're going to be allowed to exit out of the screens, and it won't warn you that hey, nothing's been saved. Okay. Now that we've kind of gone through what you can do with an actual decoder, we're going to pull back in. We're going to look more at the software again, at the DecoderPro software. We're going to walk briefly, quickly through the menus. We're not going to beat this horse to death. And when I say quickly, I mean quickly. Okay? We'll stop at the appropriate points. First, pull down the File menu. Okay? What can you do under File? You can import a DecoderPro file. Okay? You bring home the Train Club file. You can put it on your home DecoderPro. Or you take your home one and you carry it into the train. Makes things portable. Okay? Of course, if you're importing, that means you're probably also exporting. Okay? Because you're going to export it before you import it, right? You're going to export it before you import it at home. Okay? Sometimes things get a little messed up. So if you come in and your roster looks all confused and everything, you can tell it to rebuild the roster. And it will go back in and it will look at the XML file and it will pull all that data out and it will rebuild your roster. Okay. Of course, you can print out a hard copy there as well. The edit screen, the most important two here, a new local. Of course, there's an icon button there. It says new local. So why would you go here? Okay, the one you'll use the most here is the duplicate loco. Why would you duplicate a decoder? You got an A unit, you got a B unit, they got the same chip in them. Set up the A unit, save it, right? Hook up to the B unit, right? Duplicate the A unit to the B unit, download it into the decoder. You're done. Okay. Of course, maybe you got rid of an engine, right? You no longer wanted it. You can delete that loco out of your roster. Here under settings, okay, hide and show the pane. You can hide and show this down here. You can hide and show the pictures. You can do different things of that nature. Okay. Actions, okay. You can go into program, and if you click program, basically you're going to get asked these same questions. So again, you're probably not going to go there. You probably go down here, the right hand corner, and select the one you want to use. Okay. You can go to the consist tool. You can go to turnout control, where you can literally control the turnouts on your layout. Turn the track power on and off. Okay. The two basic ones that I see here that you'll use the most. Okay, start the WeThrottle server. The WeThrottle server is the wireless program that lets you use your telephone as a throttle. Okay, so if you start that server, now you can use Engine Driver to use it as a throttle. Okay, or to start the web server. If you start the web server, then you can call up any layout screens or panel screens that you may have made, bring them up in a web browser, and you can actually use them, play with them, and do things right there in a web browser. Those are probably the two most useful commands under that. Okay, LocalNet. Now, Digitrax has a whole lot of hardware out there, okay, that needs to be configured. So if you go to LocalNet, okay, it gives you all the hardware that it can talk to and help you configure. I've used it to configure PM42s. Okay, you still have to set the address using your throttle, but once the address is set, then you tell it the address of the one you want to talk to, and then you can go into the 4 different sections and you can set power limits, right, when you want it to trip and stuff like that. Real handy. Okay, much easier than trying to do it with a throttle. Okay, and then the Windows it just shows you a list of all the open windows that you have, because you can bury one pop-up under another pop-up, and this is an easy way to pop it to the top. Okay, so now we'll back up a little bit and we'll go back here. missed the help file. Okay, this does the typical things that you expect to find under help. Go online to get help, get frequently asked questions, check for updates, okay, things of that nature. Now we'll back up here and we'll talk a little bit about our preferences under the edit menu. If you click on preferences, you'll get this pop-up. Okay, connections. All right, we set this all up. Remember when we first set up the software, when we went through the wizard, it asked us who is our manufacturer, what were we connecting it with, and what serial port were we on, right? And here you can see that it's the top tab. It says LocalNet. That corresponds to the username, the connection name that I typed in down here. So you could say LocalNet 1, LocalNet 2, my network, whatever you want it to say. It's going to point it out at the top. The reason I told you earlier was because you can have more than one connection. So if you wanted to add a connection, you hit the plus tab and you get a blank box and you fill it in just like we did the first one. Okay. If for some reason you're still in the development mode, or you know you've got a problem, and when JMRI starts to power up, it's going to tell you, hey, I can't connect to this connection. And you don't want to be bothered with that. So you just come down here. You can tell it, disable this connection for right now. Ignore it. Okay. File locations. Again, defaults are the best. Okay, but if you want to put them somewhere else, this is where you would go to do it. Startup. Okay. This is not a manual type in screen. You have to push the add button down here. And then you'll get a list of things that the DecoderPro can do during startup. One of which is load a script to perform an automatic function for you. Okay, to display a certain screen, things of that nature. And you put them in the order in which you want them to happen. Okay. Here on the roster, okay, remember, again, when we were first starting up, it asked for the default owner user's name. And we told you can leave it blank if you're using this with a club, or you can put your own name in there if you're using it at home. If you want to change it, here's where you would change it. Okay. The second tab is about the programmer. Now, I showed you the advanced functions for DecoderPro. Okay, for the programmer screens. Had all those tabs up there. Okay. Perhaps you want to simplify this at a club. Okay. Perhaps the only thing you want the members to do is be able to use the basic screen where they can change their locomotive address. Okay. And things of that nature. So you would change this from advanced to basic, and then it limits the number of screens they get to see. Okay, and of course you can give it a few more options down here. You can play with those. Okay, the railroad name. Okay, by default, it's going to name every railroad my railroad. Okay, but like I did, see, I renamed this railroad to Clinic Railroad. This will become important as you advance with DecoderPro and PanelPro, because you can save more than one configuration. Okay, and of course, if you do that, you want to call them different things. So you give them different railroad names so you can tell them apart. That's beyond what we're here to discuss. Okay, I hope that what we've gone through today has helped you to see and understand JMRI. I hope it's got your curiosity level down and made you inquisitive as to how you can use it and what JMRI can do for you. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer your questions. Thank you very much.